So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are going to begin with a brief executive session, but before we do, I'd like to call for approval of the agenda, if I can.
Yeah, I just have one quick question about it. We got some things in the packet relatively late, like the branding conversation and some of the materials relating to the presentations last week. I'm a little bit unprepared as far as the stuff we got most recently, so I just want to share that with my colleagues. And I don't think it's, looking at the agenda, I don't think either of those topics are the details of the presentations or the branding conversation is on the agenda today. I just want to make sure of that.
The branding conversation will be on the agenda on August 11th.
All right, okay. That's okay, yeah. Then no issues.
And then, but we are intending to have a discussion about outtakes from the workshop last week, and
I'm ready for that.
You are ready for that. Okay. If there are no other comments to the agenda, do I hear a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 And that's carried. Mr. Davis, let's see, I guess we will be in executive session for probably about, oh, John, I'm sorry, John, I didn't see you over there on the left hand.
On the left side. So real quickly, I had a matter scheduled that it conflicts is at 9:30. So I'm going to drop off at 9:15 today, and Richard Davis is joining in. And commissioners, we don't double bill this time when two of us have to cover this type of thing. Just want you to be sure of that. But to make sure you have coverage and issues come up, I briefed Richard on matters. He'll be here for you. I'll be in the executive session. You have an invite from me on your system that for that executive session that came out earlier this week. And I would say, Commissioner, I would say it'd be about 15 minutes and no actions anticipated.
All right. So we will now exit this meeting, and we'll go into the executive meeting, and then plan to be back probably at about 8:20 or so for those who are attending the regular meeting. Very good.
Thank you,
Michael.
Okay, everybo's back. Welcome back. Okay, moving back to the regular agenda then. Let's take up action on the consent agenda, including the meeting minutes and the claims. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Old business. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Moving to old business. Review of broadband and energy special July 21st meeting. Steve, do you want to introduce this topic?
I can, Commissioner. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for, I thought that our work session that last Tuesday was quite informative, and I thought I sent out a thank you to all the presenters. I thought that how it all came together in literally in the last day or so, I thought was actually quite surprising to me. But what the commission had indicated that day was that you would all take today to sort of look back at Tuesday's workshop and discuss, what you think we may have missed in terms of opportunities for discussing those topics, and or what your take from that day really was as we move into the next item and we talk about budget priorities and we start formulating our approach to establishing our priorities for the 2021 budget. So I'll just leave it at that and allow you to, to have that discussion today. I wasn't expecting that there'd be a whole lot of we should have, why didn't we talk about this or why didn't we have this presenter? Was more as did you as a commission get enough information that day to have a serious discussion about setting priorities? So I'll just leave it at that.
Great. I too, I thought it was a very good session, time well spent. I was impressed with the variety of speakers and the variety of viewpoints from different angles of the two different subjects that we were touching on. I was happy it all came together relatively on time as well. I was pretty exhausted by the end of the day, but really kind of energized with the content that we had. The broadband, it was really useful to hear from the folks at SkagitNet and understand the nature of the relationship between the port and the PUD and the various roles that they played. And the essential message, I think, the essential takeaway for me was keep the organization lean, look for partnerships, build relationships, and be pragmatic, but consistent in pursuing your goals. And I think, Steve, it was very useful for you to summarize our initial foray, into broadband and drawing some lessons from that. And so as we move forward, as I feel we should, and I know that that's shared by the commission, I think we do that with our eyes wide open about what the opportunities and the potential liabilities could be. So I think from that standpoint, it was really good to hear from a number of parties. In regards to energy, for me, I'll just kind of wrap this up and then Atul and Mike can join in. There are a lot of great ideas being pursued in the pursuit of reducing carbon footprint, and it's very exciting to be part of those discussions. However, since we are kind of limited in our reach in energy supply, at least this point, we have the opportunity, I guess, to play the role of facilitator, like we did in the Regenis project, and to help be a catalyst in bringing along these ideas in industries like BP and like the hydrogen project, look for a solid way to implement the projects that they have on their plate. So very interested to discuss those more. And as we get into priorities for the 2021 budget, figure out how we can structure that, have adequate staff resources to pursue those, to understand again what the assets and the liabilities of those different approaches are. So I thought it was good. I thought it was really good to be able to set aside, and I appreciate all the work that went into pulling all those resources together. In that sense, I think the Zoom platform is pretty beneficial because we can draw people from Denver and Portland and all over the place and have this platform to share these ideas. So it was very, very much worthwhile. I appreciate that. I'm done. To go next.
Mike, did you want to go next?
No, go ahead, Atul.
There's two things that matters from this perspective of a workshop like this, me, and that's where are we coming from, background, and then where are we going. The broadband session did a great job of answering the questions of where we came from, what the context is, as well as helped us figure out where we're going. And I think I agree with Commissioner McClure's statement about the Skagit Net model. And I think it's important for us to say at some point in the near future that that's the kind of approach that we want to take too. I don't want to prematurely do that, but I have to say I can speak for myself. And my current feeling is that although there's people that would like us to take a deeper reach, meaning thinking about service to the individuals, I think backbone is my focus, and expanding the backbone is what I want to support as this next step. And recognizing it, that's just the next step. And there is a trunk line going out to Glacier that's already been mostly funded, as Gina will point out, and that is going to be hopefully being built soon. And to me, I want us to think about what's the next infrastructure line, and that to me seems like it's an east-west one, and it seems like it connecting some of the libraries and the high schools. Not that they're not being, many of them are being served with high-speed connectivity, but to improve our infrastructure in the east-west direction. But that requires a more in-depth discussion, which this meeting's not for. I just wanted to bring up that's what the morning was. In the afternoon, on the energy session, again, addressing those two aspects, where are we coming from, where are we going? The afternoon did a pretty good job addressing context in some of the big energy players in our region, because the PUD is not a big energy player, you know, honestly, compared to the other people that presented, of course. So the afternoon did a good job of presenting the background. But what didn't happen in the afternoon is to getting a feeling of where do we go. There were specific things that were hinted at. And I think, for example, Brian for bringing up some ideas. But I think we need to do a more detailed session about where do we go on the energy front. It doesn't have to be a whole day. It could be 2 hours. But I think the pieces that we have to talk about is what's happening on the front of substation infrastructure. What's happening on the front of how can we help advance things like digester utilization, because, you know, thank goodness PSC is continuing to honor long-term contracts on a short-term basis. Without that, the digesters that are running would be in real trouble. So, but that can't happen forever. That can't happen indefinitely. So we have to try to help, if we can, come up with solutions on the digester front, and obviously help develop, if it's sensible, new solutions on the energy front, which means, of course, the things that I talked about early when I became a commissioner, community solar, and installation at our PUD facilities, working out an arrangement to get at least a couple megawatts in lieu of a couple 100 megawatts. Let's get something done on the energy front. And I think that it can be modest, because we're modest. So we don't have a lot of depth in that area. So let's get something done. And we need a planning session on the energy front still to deal with that. And it's not so much about having fancy presentations, it's about, well, what are we going to do discussion. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I too agree with both of you that the meeting on the 21st was, it was good, it was needed. I was very pleased to hear from others, both on broadband and energy. I will say that under broadband, maybe not everybody would agree with me, but back when the PUD decided to move forward with trying to go into broadband, I thought that the PUD had a vision of what was going to be needed, and it didn't get the support that it should have. And I can only imagine where we would have been if we had tackled and started back 20 years ago, what it would be like today here. But here we are still trying to break ground in this area. I think the timing's good right now. I think there's a lot of support this time. I'm excited to move forward on this project with broadband, with the port. But I do believe we have to be very careful, because I didn't hear any of those speakers act like it was a walk in the park project. They all had their struggles, they all had their cautions. And so I would love to be able to use them. Why reinvent the wheel when we have people like Skagit Net or the Port of Bellingham, or the Bellingham, the city of Bellingham, with their expertise. If we could just use them and move forward on this, I think we could be very successful and supportive of Whatcom County. Definitely we need something in Whatcom County, especially to support education. Parents are talking to me, telling me that they literally go to the school site, sit out in the parking lot and try to pick up the district's Wi-Fi so they can support their children. And hopefully we can do something about that in the future. Energy, I thought energy was real good. A lot of good discussion, but it does open a big area. Where do we go next? So I agree with that. We need to meet again and discuss where do we go from here. So that's about all I had to say.
Very good. Very good. Steve, anything to add from your perspective that you haven't already said?
No, I just that I would, at your, with your okay, I will take these comments this morning and start developing ideas on next steps in terms of especially in a full discussion around energy opportunities.
Yeah.
And also, we are already starting to work with the Port of Bellingham staff, and John is assisting us in developing a much more formalized agreement with the Port of Bellingham on how to, what are the next steps that we can take. And I would expect to bring that back to you, probably at our next regular meeting.
I have a meeting with Gina tomorrow afternoon to go over that. As the commission knows, we represent the Port of Bellingham as well. We had a conflict waiver when we set up the initial interlocal agreement to go into strategic planning. So this meeting is following up on that, and we'll come back and let you know what we think we need to do to go forward on the next phases and steps from an agreement perspective.
And as we had discussed before, you'll be presenting us with various options, correct? So that we can, I think one of the things that we still need to assess is level of appetite for risk, which will cut into these various options that we can consider, because I think that's going to be a useful next discussion for the commission to have. I think we all have a sense of where that might lead, but I think it would be nice to have it fleshed out a little bit more, so we have at least more defined concepts that we can consider. Brian, I didn't ask for if you had any input, since you were the lead-in speaker on the energy front in the afternoon. Is there any free-ranging thoughts that you had after that discussion?
I don't know about free-ranging thoughts, but yeah, I think that the gist of the presentation was there's unlimited possibilities in terms of what direction we go. So exploring that with the commission, what you would like to do is valid. The other thing is, regardless of what direction we want to go on the energy front, events are going to occur on the power supply side that are going to force decisions, regardless of what projects you want to get involved in, et cetera. So, one of the things that we're working on for a future, and this is jumping ahead, but for a future commission meeting would be a presentation by the company that we brought on board, the Energy Authority, make a presentation on power supply management and what that means and, you know, how that might change the organization. So looking forward to those discussions.
Good. Sounds good.
I just, Jeff, one comment to John. John, when you're thinking about these agreements, John and Steve, obviously, I'm sure you'll also be looking at the pros and cons of interlocal versus an LLC versus all of that too.
Yeah, I've already started looking at that, Commissioner. We could go into some of the thoughts here. I'm not.
For me, no, I just wanted to bring it up.
Okay, yeah, we're looking at that, and we'll be prepared to discuss that in whatever level of detail you prefer.
Great.
Very good. Thanks for your thoughts, everyone. While we're still on this subject, why don't we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 2021 budget projects and priorities. We've already had an opportunity to offer some thoughts to staff on some of our budget priorities for 2021. And I think the main question now is, after having gone through this workshop on broadband and energy, how does that affect, if it does affect, our priorities for going forward for the next year as staff begins in earnest to prepare that budget? So again, Steve, would you like to tee this up for us?
Sure, I'm trying. Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And I'm trying to get to the point of screen sharing here. So give me a second. But this, as you recall, you gave us a list of preliminarily a list of items, and my help is on the way here. So
And this is, you're probably wanting to share the same memo that we have in our packet, correct?
yes.
Okay.
You can go ahead and, is it this one, is that the one you're looking for?
Yes. Yeah.
While that's going on, Commissioners, just a reminder, I have to jump off about 9:15, 9:20.
Yeah.
So, and Richard's able to cover.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Commissioners, we're sharing that list of budget potential project lists that that we had put together based upon our first discussion on this topic. And so we thought we'd bring that back to you today and hopefully come out of today with not necessarily a 1, 2, 3, but maybe more of a category of, high priority, medium priority, and low priority, and so that we can start developing, staff can really use this to start developing a much more focused approach for our 2021 budget. And I think that hopefully today we might actually be able to consolidate some of these into much more broader topics like energy versus water versus telecom and so forth. But I'll just leave it at that, Commissioner McClure, if you want to lead the discussion on this.
Yeah, and I think what we might do is have a bit of a general discussion. It might be a little lengthy for everyone to go through their list and say this is high, medium, low, high, medium, low. I'm wondering if, as a lead-off portion of the discussion, and depending on how much time we have available to us, if each commissioner could identify on this list what are their highest priorities. And then if there isn't much time left, perhaps each of us can take this list and fill in the medium and the lower priorities. And I think that we probably all, I know for me, all of them demand important consideration. And just because we mark something a low priority doesn't mean we don't care about it. We're looking at this through the lens of 2021. Some of these may well be longer term aspirations for the organization that drift higher in the priority list. So I'm thinking, you know, with the blessing of my fellow commissioners, maybe we should do a round of everyone identifying on this list what they see as their top priorities first for the 2021 budget cycle. How does that sound, Mike? And a tool for a way to kind of weave our way through this discussion?
You want me to start? Or go ahead, Atul.
Actually,
Well,
Mike, and Atul, unless you had a question, maybe I'll have Mike lead us off on this portion of it.
certainly.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, I have to back up quite a ways, but I'll try to get through it quick. My whole idea of running in the very beginning is remembering my generations of family being in the area and me growing up in this area and seeing streams and trees and shade and fish, and the atmosphere is a lot different than it was today. I ran because I saw the need that water and our rivers and streams were all being looked upon differently than they are now. And so water is always going to be my highest, because without water, clean water, quality of water, and quantity of water, we'd be in a different position here in this county. So I do have a lot of concern about the water issues, which a lot of it wraps around that climate change, as well as, you know, the use of water, group A, B, private, industrial. So water is always going to be my highest priority. And without getting into a whole bunch of that, I think that covers it. That's going to be the first thing I'm going to hold to. How we get to covering a lot of the other subjects, there's 20 there, though communication literally covers 3 big ones. Community, other governments, and staff. So that's a big one by itself. But for now, I'm just going to say that, and then I'll wait and hear from you other 2 commissioners and see where we go from there.
So Mike, just to make sure that I understand that, you know, and thank you for that perspective. Those subjects on this list that pertain to water, I'm starting from the bottom and working the way up. That would include watershed management and watershed planning as high priorities for you, correct?
As well as the climate change, because that does affect, we have to be thinking of the future, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think climate change is real big. New water, private wells, group A, B, anything to do with water for us consuming it, and how we use it and be good stewards of it is a big issue to me, concern.
Okay. I'm just populating this list here. So while we're talking about, okay, very good. Anything else on the list, or would you prefer to kind of circle back around after both Atul and I have a step to the plate?
I'd rather circle back around. We'll just
Okay.
move forward.
Sounds good. Atul?
As an organization, I think the PUD has established a very important place in the world of water, and I think water has to be our #1 priority going forward. When I look at this list, I'm thinking about what's the change, what's the evolution, and so what are the new things that where we haven't put resources that we should put resources. And so the things, and not in any particular order, that fall under that are the community solar, fiber, and private well owners. Because I see things like watershed management, planning, and assessment, and all of these things that include the things that Brian talked about, which is our infrastructure and our evolution of our infrastructure and supply. That's got resources, and it's going to continue to get resources. I'm thinking about the things that haven't gotten resources that could use additional resources. So I hope that's clear. There's the overall organizational priorities, and then there's priorities associated with the budget for incremental development.
So when you mentioned fiber, broadband is also on the list. And this is exactly what I think Steve is talking about, is that we can probably collapse a few of these under broader categories. And so I probably would link the two of those together, I would imagine.
Yeah, there are some people who believe that, in separating the two, but I personally think they should be together. And because as infrastructure, sure, in the short term, wireless infrastructure, for example, does help, but where the work that's been neglected, that needs the attention, is not wireless. It's fiber backbone. In the short term, in the near term, I know there's efforts to obviously get things like hotspots and things like that to people, which is not to say that that's not important. That is important. It's just that the long-term budget priority should not be that. It should be creating the backbone infrastructure that really serves the community.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. Anything else you want to share?
No, at this point, in the interest of time, I feel like that's
Great. So I share the same sentiments as my fellow commissioners that water rights and water planning are obviously our number one priority. It's kind of how we have grown up as a PUD, and we have created a good leadership position and great partnerships and relationships within the community. And I think that we need to continue to focus on that as a top priority. As both Mike and Atul have identified, fiber, I think, is an important opportunity that we need to be ready to pursue, and we've already discussed that at length. So I think dedicating the resources for whatever planning needs to be done in the coming year, I think, is going to be an important priority. Energy, the discussion on energy that we just recently had, as I'd mentioned in the previous segment, I see us as perhaps a catalyst in some of these developments that are already occurring. And we obviously can't do it all, probably shouldn't do it all, but it's going to take, I think, some dedicated staff time to determine what the best opportunities might be for us to play a role in reducing the carbon footprint and with a goal toward climate change initiatives. So on this list, there are 4 active initiatives, some of which I think can be linked together. The BP refinery solar project, I think, is something that is potentially very real and could be linked with community solar in our relationship with power provider in the county like PSE and the initiatives that the city of Bellingham is looking very closely at. So that's one potential project where our role may be creating the link to the energy grid, and so that may be a very real possibility for us to make a dramatic impact in the creation of sustainable energy here in the community. Hydrogen project is another one that I think could have a dramatic impact. That we don't know how real that is at this point. There needs to be more analysis, obviously, on the part of the proponents of the project, and we need to understand better what our role might be in that one. And then, of course, there's RNG with the discussion that Eric Powell brought to us, which would be another opportunity to not only support the agriculture industry in the community, but harvest this gas for a sustainable fuels project. Like I said, we can't do all of these things, and maybe a few of these won't come to fruition in this next planning horizon. But I think if we're going to be serious about playing some sort of a role, we need to either dedicate the staff time to it or create a new position potentially that gives us a little bit more breadth that would allow us to do some meaningful analysis of the opportunities. We may want to discuss that a little bit more. The final thing that we haven't talked about in a while, we brought up at the end of last year, is transition planning. I think this needs to become a real priority toward the end of this year, and into the next year may have more impacts on staffing. Our GM has graciously extended his stay through the end of 2021, and which has been a tremendous benefit to the organization. So if we're going to be serious about doing a thoughtful job of transition planning, I would like to see us start that discussion as early as our next meeting, with an eye toward creating a position that would have substantial amount of overlap with Steve, so that we have a seamless transition into the next phase of leadership. So transition planning, I think, would be a real high priority for me. So with that in mind, Steve, I guess the question might be back to you, would it be beneficial for each of the commissioners to take a pass at lumping these together and putting high, medium, and low priorities on this? Or would it be best if you linked a few of these together, so we had them organized in a way that the related parts are next to one another, and then send that out for people to fill in? What would be most beneficial in moving this forward for the budgeting process?
I think that, Commissioner, I think that it would be better for me to do the latter, taking the comments today, again, maybe consolidating or grouping the list that we have in front of us, and identify. I thought that Commissioner Dishmani's comments were, point on, in that we need to look at this list and whatever the prioritization, whatever the priority list comes out to be, we need to look at it as both what are the resources that we're providing in terms of staff, consultants, the cost of doing that today on the core business as usual, and extending the existing work, say on watershed planning, on water rights and so forth, on energy, and what if we don't take on any additional initiatives in 2021, what is staffing, what are the resources, what are the dollars that we need just to continue this business as usual? Because there's going to be additional cost and additional resources that need to be applied, especially in the area of energy, in terms of working, with FERC and WEC, and in terms of our transmission operative ownership, all those kind of things. And then do okay, now if we're going to take on more in broadband or more in energy, by grouping these projects and programs that you've identified today, what does that look like? And then third, layer over all of that with this issue of transition. And it's not, keep in mind, it's not just my transition out. It's also, we need to look at, some other staff members that are getting to that point in in age and tenure here with the PUD over the next couple of years, and overlay all of that over with, okay, business as usual. What does the staffing look like? What does it look like in the next couple of years? Then adding some of these others. And so I think if I take the next couple of weeks and do that, provide it back out to the commission, not in terms of actual, here's a line item budget impact, but just generally, what are the considerations that we need to apply here? Then we can move that into, say, a September or late August. What does that really start looking like in our budget? So,
did I understand correctly? Is that something you would send back out to us before our August 11 meeting for consideration?
yeah, I think I can do that.
Okay.
And I think we need to. I think we need to move this fairly quickly because we need to start making some fairly semi-firm decisions on what the budget looks like in 2021 at least by September. So
Great. Okay. So you have sufficient input at this point to take a meaningful charge at the next step on this.
I think so.
Good. Okay. That sounds good. Atul, Mike, any closing comments before we move on the agenda?
I just to reaffirm the new point you brought up in when you spoke again about transition planning. I agree completely.
Great.
I too, I'm sorry, Jeff, but I too support what you just said. So what is that, 5 months away? It's January already of 2021. So it's coming quick and we need to be planning for that. That's a big foundation shaker for us.
Although I was under the impression until this moment that Steve was somehow extending his longevity in proportion to the COVID crisis, but apparently that's not the way it works.
If he extends again, I think it'll be immortality. Maybe we can talk.
We all know that immortality is not the option.
Well, we can always hope. Very good. Okay, thanks for everybody's thoughts. Let's move on to resolution number 774, Commission Open Public Meeting Policy. Steve, is this you?
No,
I can do that since I still got about 5 minutes or so here, commissioners. This was on your agenda last time. You had a couple minor edits that you directed staff to make. We made those and we decided to bring it back as a formal resolution. Again, this was to give you guidance and in particular staff guidance when the extension of the suspension of the Open Public Meetings Act was only coming every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I would tell you that the Association of Washington Cities, Association of Washington Counties, and the Public Ports Association earlier this week sent a letter to all 4 of the legislative leaders. Again, that's the House and the Senate majority and minority leaders who have to approve the extensions of the suspension. They sent a letter asking that the next extension be for 60 days so that public agencies don't face this question that the district here was facing. And again, the PUD was particularly hit because these extensions would come out Wednesday night or Thursday, and you were trying to get your packet out by midday Wednesday to advise the public as to what type of meeting you were holding, virtual or in person. And so you passed this policy to direct staff what to do in phase 2 or phase 3. So it's there for your approval, consistent with what the direction was last meeting.
Good. I just had, this looks great to me, John. I just have one minor thing.
Okay.
On number 2B, should it read in the event?
This maximum.
This maximum, not his maximum?
That's right. His maximus.
Referring to James.
Yeah, his maximus. No, it was not meant to be the gladiator or, Caesar Maximus. Yeah. It was just this. Thank you for the typo catch.
Gender neutral, right. Very good. Okay, sounds good.
With that revision, I recommend a motion to approve. Resolution 774.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 774 with the correction.
Been moved and seconded to approve resolution number 774. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that is carried. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to new business.
I'm going to jump out now. It seems like a good segue, commissioners. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, John. Welcome, Rich. You're in the batter's box now. So, approved change order for circuit switch gear purchase. Brian.
Good morning, commissioners. I will actually handle this action item and the next one as well. Back in April, the commission approved the purchase of two 115 kV circuit switchers from Southern States. Southern States was the lowest responsive bid for those pieces of equipment. After the commission's approval, we obviously entered into discussions with Southern States, and it became clear in those discussions on the specifications for the circuit switchers that there was an omission in the specifications, and within Southern States' bid, they had not provided for testing and commissioning of their equipment. And there's probably a number of reasons for this. It wasn't in our specifications, but in previous bids for equipment, it was kind of assumed that testing and commissioning was within that. In this case, it wasn't. And I think partly because of COVID-19, I don't want to put all the blame there, but the equipment manufacturers and the suppliers have different staff involved, inexperienced staff, and where in the past they may have just automatically included testing and commissioning, they didn't this time. Staff looked at the other bids. None of the bidders included testing and commissioning. Southern States came back to us and said, well, we can add that in for an additional $10,000. And as you can see from the action memo, even adding that $10,000 to Southern's original bid, they are still the lowest bidder. So with that, we're asking for approval of this change order to add testing and commissioning to what they are going to provide with those circuit switchers. I'll also add, it's this testing commissioning of this new equipment. It's intelligent, smart equipment. It's kind of like taking your car in for repair, and they have to hook it up to the testing machine. It's specific to the equipment you're purchasing. They're the only ones that have the equipment that do the proper testing. So you're kind of on the hook. I'll also say that $10,000 is actually on the low end of what we normally see for testing and commissioning. So it's reasonable from our perspective.
Brian, did I understand, is it the second qualified bidder, Anixter? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes.
Did they also not provide testing and commissioning?
Correct. Anixter either did McKay Evergreen.
Okay.
And we went back and looked at our specifications, and they clearly have that right. The testing and commissioning wasn't specifically spelled out in our specifications for that equipment.
Yeah, yeah. So we're not in, since none of them provided it, we're not in any at any risk of someone bringing a claim against us.
I do not believe so. I turned to Richard on that one, but I don't believe, had the $10,000 pushed them above the next lowest responsive bid, I think we would have to go back out.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I would agree.
Yeah. Sounds good. Mike?
Has this, Brian, has this evolved our specifications for contracts now going forward? Is this going to Have you added in your template, have you added testing as part of your template now?
Well, the interesting thing, this kind of is a segue to the next action item, because yes, it is pushing us in that direction of coming up with a better template and formalizing some of the bid specs that were sort of informal in the past. So
Is
to
there
answer
any-
your question? Yes.
Is there anything about this, I would call it a minor, but this minor oops that has caused us to potentially under scope the testing work that we need to get? And I just want to make sure that we recognize that there's not just testing upon acceptance, there's ongoing diagnostics. And how is that going to be covered with this particular equipment?
Well, it's twofold. One, there are tests that our staff can do and have been doing regularly on equipment installed in our substations. And the other is, and I'll use the refinery substation as the best example, is that we actually let a testing commissioning bid out when the refinery is going to do a turnaround. We do an exhaustive analysis, review, testing of the equipment in the substation. So we handle it in two ways. The initial commissioning that has to be done by the manufacturer, then later on, ongoing commissioning, fine tuning, etc. But it does lead us in the direction of much more rigorous specifications for equipment, particularly in this transition to digital equipment is causing many utilities to take a second look at their specifications and procedures for installing equipment. One example I just noticed here recently, Kellett's PUD, which is a much larger PUD than we are, but also has an industrial base and is dealing with the changes in the industry, currently is out advertising for a new engineer position. That engineer's sole responsibility is going to be standards and specifications because that industry is evolving so quickly. I hope that answers your question. But
It does.
Very good.
So I can make a motion if we're ready.
We are.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the change order number 1 with Southern States for the extra $10,480 for a total with no tax of $125,880.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve change order number 1 with Southern States. All those in favor say aye.
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 And that is carried. Thanks very much. And the second one, Brian.
yes, and this one, as I just alluded to, is in some ways tied to the first one, in that we've had some issues with the standards, the specifications that we use both for equipment and for construction work in the electric system. And this particular one kind of came out of moving forward with the refinery, the Ferndale, the new Ferndale substation. We got into much more detailed discussions even after the award of the bid for different pieces of equipment, prolonged conversations with the manufacturers, trying to iron things out on not only on specs, but etc. And then if you'll remember with the Ferndale substation, we bifurcated the project where we're ordering some equipment ahead of the actual construction of the project. So we always intended to go out later with a construction contract bid to build the substation and integrate some of the major pieces of equipment that we will have already purchased. And in doing that, it became clear, particularly on BKI's part, and they really brought this to our attention, is that there's equipment specifications, but then there's the specifications you want and the procedures you want your contractor to follow. I mean, we can't direct the contractor's work, but in letting the construction contract, we can really provide them with a framework. You know, if you're landing control wires, this is how we want you to do it. You know, you use this method and you reference a standard for, you know, basically attaching control wires to the terminal end. This type of thing, we've never had that level of detail with the contractors. It's always been sort of reinvent the wheel, ad hoc, you know, plan it as you go. And it was clear that this wasn't working anymore. And also the fact that not only do we have the Ferndale substation project, right behind it, we've got another rebuild of the refinery substation, and potentially with this discussion of some of these clean fuel projects at Cherry Point, we may have another substation right behind that one. And we're in the past, we didn't modify our electric system that much. Now we're getting these serial projects where it'd be extremely helpful and in the long run save us money if we really standardized as much as we could, both on the equipment side and the way how we want the construction to proceed. So we don't get into these, you know, here's what we proposed in our bid, here's what you're asking for, they don't quite mesh up. You know, a lot of behind the scenes conversations with both equipment suppliers and contractors. And we just felt like this is the time to do a pause. The Ferndale substation is in a prolonged permitting process. We still don't have our permits in place. And so it was better to take this time now, get this standardized, and we'll be set up to go to the construction phase of this project and get ready for the refinery project to follow. So that's kind of the genesis of this thing. I hardly support it. I mean, definitely support it. It's a little inconvenient that's happening right now, but we've got the time to get it right. So I'm asking basically for approval of this work order with BKI to do that work, get us in that position.
So Brian, we will own this set of specifications, and then will BKI draw on that for subsequent design on other projects then?
Yes, the idea here is to have that basic template, that framework, and then as we get a specific project, like everything that we do at the Ferndale substation isn't going to be done when we basically redo the refinery substation. So then we'll tweak those provisions in the template that need to be changed to address, you know, the specific project. But we'll have a template. You know, if I digress a minute, in the past, what we used was WSDOT's standards, and they really worked well for groundwork. You know, for if we're building, we're putting trenching in, or we're going to build a bridge, piping, all this kind of stuff. The WSDOT standards work really well. Not so well for electrical infrastructure, particularly smart infrastructure that we're headed towards. There's no accepted single standard within the electric utility industry. Everybody kind of, based on the characteristics of their system, does some of their own thing. You know, the IEEE has some standards that apply. You know, even the American Public Power Association has some templates they can offer, but there's no one standard. So I think this is just something sort of as we've evolved, and we've got staff that can understand this, and we've got consultants on board that can help us with it. It's time to do it.
So when do we inherit a certain amount of responsibility when we're providing the specifications to our consultant? In my world, it's our team that provides the specification for the project. And so we have the responsibility for coordinating our drawings and the specifications and provide that to the owner. When we do it, this is a little different than that. And I understand what you're saying about WSDOT. WSDOT standards are a little bit one size fits all, good for some things and not so good for the others. So I understand the wisdom of having this specification, but the fact that we're the owners of that, providing it to our consultants, do they then have the opportunity to say, that was your spec?
Well, I think there's always that risk, but we, staffing wise, we do what we can. And, once we take ownership of the specs and take ownership of the drawings, we can, to the extent possible, keep them updated, but then sometimes we'll even use, contract firms to help us with that. But I'll give you another good example. We're in really pretty good shape on our transmission structures and transmission line, because over the years, as we started improving our transmission line from Bellingham out to the refinery, we got a better and better idea of what we wanted in terms of what kind of cross arms, what kind of insulators, and we started building specifications around that with the consultants' assistance. But at this point, we're in pretty good shape there. We can, when we go out to bid, and we know what structures involved, we can say, here's what we want in the way of equipment and installation. Yeah. We're just not there with substations yet.
It does make sense because we have various vendors. We don't always have a consultant in the middle of that relationship, so it would be clear to have that. So I assume also that we will invest the staff time to keep that resource, that specification current as we have new products that come in. We're not just letting someone, it's not like Wikipedia where it's open source. Someone is curating the quality of that specification.
Right. I know from your perspective, you can't see that, but there's certain small utilities, and we're not in that camp, that will basically, they want a new substation, they just turn it over to the consultant. Say, design it and build it. And they pretty much take a hands off. We're I would say, much more advanced than that, somewhere between a small utility and a much larger utility. But
Atul, Mike, questions?
No, not really. I think this is a very practical way to deal with not being a bigger utility and wanting to have some of the controls that a bigger utility would have. So I think it's a practical approach. I just asked Brian, I'm sure you think about this all the time, but just continue to think about conflict of interest in different stages of the project, and how a person might unintentionally write the spec in a way that makes their engineering services uniquely advantageous in the marketplace. So the best people make those mistakes. So just let's think about that, and maybe having an extra set of eyes on the final spec in addition to ours for input might be helpful, because we rely a lot on Brown and Kaiser, and they're great. They just said it might be good to have an extra set of eyes on the spec that they develop, just because we're going to we work with lots of different people.
So noted.
Mike, anything?
No questions, no.
I just have one further question. Task A says district provided specification requiring minimal review, and then task B is the same for requiring thorough review. Why are those two additive? It seems like it's one or the other, but I'm probably missing something in the, you're either doing a minimal review or a thorough review.
There's some specifications and standards that we already have that staff's put together. And for those specs, I wish we could, we've got a worksheet of multiple provisions in the standards. I don't know what the total number is. And then we went down through and kind of prioritized, here's standards we've used. We just want BKI to give us their input on them.
Yeah.
There's some standards that we've got that we really haven't flushed out. We need much more review and input from BKI. And then there's ones we just don't have that we want BKI to develop. So it was that's how we prioritize this A, B, and C.
I get it. When I read it, I thought they were using the same documents and reviewing it minimally at first and then thoroughly a second time. So.
Well, you're familiar with WASDAT. If you look through all their provisions that are in their specs or their standards, it's immense.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, no further questions. Is there a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the work order number 13 for engineering services with Brown and Kaiser.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve work order number 13 with Brown and Kaiser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that's Atul. Did you respond? Yeah, good. Okay, thanks. That is passed.
Thank you.
That concludes new business. We'll move on to the general manager report.
Commissioners, I don't have anything to add at this time.
Very good. Thank you. We'll then move on to commissioner reports. So who would like to begin? Atul?
So just really, I don't want to take up much time, leaving time for public comment. I continue discussions with Energy Northwest, and I'll be able to provide an update soon. They sent me some information to review on services they provide. I haven't actually had a chance to review that very carefully. And there's Energy Northwest board meetings this week, which I'll be attending. And that's about it for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mike?
I really don't have anything to share. I eagerly look for life to go back to normal again, if I can say that. But you know, we do what we have to do during these times. So
Yeah,
that's it.
I just have a couple of items that, thanks, Mike, a couple of items that I've already mentioned. So on the August 11th agenda, I would like to at least begin an initial discussion on what this transition planning might look like. And so I don't think we need to really do any preparation for that, other than to, you know, give some consideration about what a timeline might look like, what form it might take. And I know Steve will be available to bring some resources available. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that, just because I think it's important to keep this project or the process moving. The other is on logo and branding. We had that presentation, I think at our last meeting, I can't remember, and said we would bring it back up for consideration on the 11th. I know that everyone has just received the slide deck in their packet for this last meeting, but if you would be able to review that and give some input by the end of next week, which I believe is the 7th of August, I believe is right. If you were able to give some input to Steve and Ann, that way we could submit that to our graphic designer, Heidi, whom I'd like to have come back for that meeting, and then we could have more of a discussion about that. Again, not to make any decisions, but to just continue that conversation so we can move that along. So I wanted to bring that up. Yes, Mike?
Did you say in our packet we received something on the branding?
I thought we did, Ann, is that correct? I thought maybe.
If we did, I
put it in this last packet. I'll send it. I can make another copy for you, Mike, and also did send it electronically.
Okay. You have it, Atul?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
And my other quick comment was I did submit a request to WAPUDA for other PUDs that have gone through the branding process recently, and I haven't received any responses yet. Okay,
good. I must have commingled that with other papers for today's meeting because I had a hard copy of it. So once you receive it, comments back by the end of next week, and then we'll take that discussion up on the 11th. Good. Very good. So if that concludes commission reports, we'll move on to public comment then.
Mike, did
and
you have
I'll-
any? Did we hear from Mike? Mike, did you have any commissioner comment?
Yeah, he said that he did not.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
And do we have anyone wishing to?
I just give the comments to Steve.
I have two comments, and then I have a request from one of the attendees to ask if she could make a verbal comment at this time. But I'll read the first, the written comments that we received. This first one just reads this, and this will go into the record. I'd really like to see countywide fiber internet services available. It would be a game changer for our county, especially if the service was available from the county instead of from major companies like Comcast and CenturyLink. We have had bad experiences with both of those companies and don't like the idea of them allowing better access to sites that they profit from. Thanks much.
And who was that comment from, Steve? Does it say?
This was from a person, the name is Carrie, I believe it's pronounced Carrie Revelstoke.
Okay.
The second comment received is from Christine Grant, and this is, I agree that the fiber backbones are important, but the real value of fiber is when we can get it to homes and businesses. My understanding is the port does not have jurisdiction to provide fiber to the premises, but the PUD does have the ability to make fiber to the premises infrastructure investments. This is a critical way that the port and the PUD are different. Could the commissioner discuss their thoughts on investments in backbone versus fiber to the premises? The second comment is also from Christine Grant, and it says, she said, climate change is listed as a potential project for the 2021 budget. What does that mean? And then she followed up with another comment, says, if you want to give me talking ability, which I mean, suggest that means today, can she make the verbal comment? I can ask these myself. My point is just that climate change is a pretty broad issue.
All right.
That's what we have. So commissioners, if you want to allow Christine to make a verbal comment at this time, we can do that. If you want to just take her comments into the record, and we can provide further comments at our next meeting.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. To Steve, maybe you can clarification. One of the things we talked about broadband was going dark fiber, I believe, and that we could only go up to we couldn't do the last mile. That's from the pole to a person's home. Is that true as a public agency, or can we run right to the person's home and they can connect with us? Like,
we cannot provide what is considered retail services to the home. It's my understanding that we can provide the public, literally hang the fiber to the home, but we cannot provide that retail internet, services. But I believe, and I will need to confirm this with Christine's comment about the port, I believe the port has that same authority.
Okay, because that
Yeah, I think there's just a little confusion about retail authority, and neither the port nor the PUD has retail authority,
Right.
but we can physical infrastructure we want. And just since I'm talking in general, I don't disregard the importance of fiber to the premise. I just think that it is maybe a bridge too far based on where the PUD is today, and based on I want to see it get started, and that doesn't preclude that on any particular case, for example, where fiber to the premises would be essential, considered essential, or truly serve a higher purpose, I would be very open to that. And there, I don't know specific examples of that at this particular moment, but I can imagine that there are. And so a particular library, a particular high school, a particular tribal community center, or other community center, all of those might be certainly an important exception.
Mike,
Yeah, thank you. It is a concern. I didn't share it earlier, but if we do go forward with this, and I hope we do with the broadband, the concern of mine is to take it the last mile and then have a provider take it to the house. And I'm just going to pick numbers because I don't know, but as a public agency, we sell to the provider for $10 a connection, and then they proceed to charge, say, $130 to the end user. These are concerns of mine for the future, that if we're going to provide public, the end person at the end should be able to receive the benefit. So it's going to be a conversation I think we're going to have in the future.
Just commissioners, Christine has provided two more comments under the question and answer format, and I'll just read it. Several PUDs are doing fiber to the house, and I wasn't talking about retail authority. And then she provided a link to a service map, and we'll look at that and see what that can provide. So.
all right. I have to hop off. If we want to allow Christine to talk, I will pass control for this meeting over to you, Mike, to conduct that and then call for adjournment. But I unfortunately have to drop off and move to another meeting.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. Steve, if I can ask you, do you think Christine would want to still continue?
I'm assuming she would. Okay, no, she just commented. She said, "It is fine. I made my points. Thank you all." So.
Right. Very good. I think that's the end of public comment. And look at this, we ended at 9:44. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. Motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.